Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Mark McNamee.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good. Audio's working. Thank you for joining us today for this session on Ukraine, a Marshall Plan for Ukraine. So we'll talk about long-term reconstruction efforts and how we get there. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. So my name is Mark McNamee. I am the co-founder and co-owner of UBN Network. That's Ukraine Business News Network. I moved to Kyiv from London a year and a half ago to start the company. Our mission is to help Western investors, right? Western multinational corporations continue their investments in the market and help them understand the operational environment in Ukraine. So our mission is to obviously help on the economic front of the war, right? And this is part of the economic front, what we're talking about today. And thanks to our loyal and very supportive sponsor, Piraeus Bank, who has been with us since the beginning and helped facilitate this panel, in fact. So thank you very much to Piraeus Bank, and also thank you to GlobeSec for including us and having this important panel on Ukraine's long-term reconstruction. So with that, as far as the speakers to delve into these topics, we have the right people to speak. So I'd like to welcome them on stage. So first and foremost, the Deputy Minister of Finance of Ukraine, Oleksandr Kava. Thank you, Oleksandr.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Secondly, we have Tomáš Kopečný, the Governmental Envoy for Reconstruction of Ukraine of Czechia.
Hey.
Tomáš.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for making the effort, literally. And lastly, we have Charlotte Ruhe, the Managing Director for Central and Southeastern Europe at the EBRD.
Thank you.
Charlotte, thank you very much for joining us.
Nice to see you.
Yes.
It's great to have you here.
And Charlotte, a fellow Midwestern American, just like I am. So a little message to Europe and Ukraine that you still have strong supporters in America, despite some of the headlines lately. So thank you very much. We can all have a seat now. So to begin, I'll start with a question that I was asked, Oleksandr, just a couple days ago before coming here. As you know, in Ukraine, we've been getting, particularly the last couple of weeks, getting bombed pretty badly all these nights. And I was asked by a friend, they said, what are you going to talk about in Prague? I said, we have a panel on reconstruction and the new Marshall Plan for Ukraine. And he said, are you kidding me? What reconstruction? I just spent 4 hours last night at the bomb shelter with my wife and kid, and we're talking about reconstruction in the future. So what would be your response to my friend? Why should we be talking about reconstruction today when obviously the war is still going on?
It's a very good discussion, very good question about reconstruction, because the war is in Ukraine still on. And unfortunately, every day the fights are happening in the eastern, in the southern part of Ukraine, and we are losing lives, we have destructions. But on the other hand, we have to finance all situations related with our expenditures. And as of now, half of Ukrainian budget is generated by taxes and any state charges, and other half of expenditures comes from our partners, from European Union, from United States of America, and from other G7 countries from all over the world. And in order to keep Ukrainian economy operational, and in order to keep our ability to fight, we need to develop the economic front of Ukraine. We need to develop this basis, and also we need to finance the issues which are related with the people which were relocated inside Ukraine. We have about 8 million of Ukrainians who moved from currently occupied territories or territories which are located close to the front line to more safe western and central parts of Ukraine. And it's also important for us to develop the infrastructure there. The third issue of importance of reconstruction is the territories which were deoccupied after the Russian aggression. We need to rebuild roads there, we need to rebuild bridges in order to have internal connections, and also we need to restore the infrastructure which was available for Ukrainians. So all these three aspects are important for us to do even now, not to wait until the end of the war. Because after the war ends, Ukraine needs to develop its economy and be resilient in all issues which are related. Thanks.
Right, good. Thank you for that. Tomáš, I'll hand it over to you now, get more of a European perspective. In your discussions, not only within the Czech government, but also European partners as well, and given, obviously, what Trump has been vocalizing in the last couple of months of some disengagement, is European engagement sufficient, you think, for Ukraine's long-term reconstruction?
In some aspects, it might be sufficient for the reconstruction itself. For the total recovery, and especially the defense, and therefore the sustainability of the recovery, it will hardly be sufficient by itself. But the biggest hope we see, I see myself personally, is in the interaction with the Ukrainian industries themselves, talking especially about the defense industry. I mean, now the big discussion is, will US leave Ukraine on its own militarily? Yeah, probably. Will US leave Europe on its own? Might be. But the point is, Ukrainians are showing us that gradually they are able to get rid of this dependency on the supplies from the United States, on the technologies from the United States. Still, there are some areas in which it will take a long time. But more than 60% of the production these days...
60, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, more than 60% is Ukrainian-made in terms of the supplies for the Ukrainian military. And that's what we can do, and that's what we are doing also as Czechia. We're transferring the technologies. Now there are 3 lines of production open already in Ukraine itself: large caliber, small caliber ammo, and assault rifles. And that's the way forward, I believe, also in the civilian sectors.
And would you mind specifying some civilian sectors?
Already now we can see that, yes, this is a stage for the, say, fast or small recovery in terms of the attractiveness for private investments. But most importantly, we see that it is already happening. Last autumn, I was opening a new power plant, wind power plant in Lviv region, worth of 60 million euro, done by a Czech entity. It's operating, it's delivering electricity to 125,000 citizens of the region. So you can see that it can be not only a humanitarian or charitable assistance, but more and more. And that's the story, I believe, for the recovery of Ukraine. It's going to be about the business model in which it will operate long-term, like the Marshall Plan was. It was about loans. It was about business efficiency, not so much about charity.
Right. Interesting. We'll come back to a couple of those things. Definitely important points. And I think it's worth stressing how much investment is going on currently, as both of you have just mentioned, from the private sector. And we know that in our business. Right? We've gained clients, sponsors, reinvestment in the country. As one of our major client of ours, a German firm, said, headquarters supports the business. This isn't charity. I make an easy business case for further investment in Ukraine. And that's currently during the war, so we can imagine for the future. Great, Charlotte, let's move it to you. So talking more about the financial side of things via EBRD and other international partners. What financial instruments do we have currently, and ideally will we need and try to get to in order to, more or less build back better, as the phrase goes?
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I'd just like to pay tribute to the resilience and strength of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine is incredibly important for EBRD, and since the start of the war, we have invested 7 billion euros in Ukraine. So absolutely, the investment has to happen to keep powering the country, to keep the trains running, to keep the water running, and to enable the private sector to grow and pay taxes and, employ people. And it's happening on a constant basis. Already this year, we've invested 870 million euros in some 26 projects across the country. So our shareholders have given us a capital increase of 4 billion euros to enable us to scale up our investment, already quite substantial, for the reconstruction. Now, what are we doing to enable a smoother and better functioning massive reconstruction project in Ukraine? Working together with the government, working together with the EU, we're creating a single project pipeline for the public infrastructure so that all of the donors, the IFIs, the SOEs, the government agencies know who is responsible for what project, who is financing it, who is implementing it. And this is a really important form of coordination. We're also working on preparing sectors, for example, working on a support scheme for renewable energy. Renewable energy is really important because it helps Ukraine clean its energy supply, but also diversify it. And its own, nobody can take the sun away. You don't have to rely on that for cross-border shipment. And so things like this will also be important for the reconstruction.
And can I follow up on that? We're talking on the one end about, there are distinct topics. Support coming from abroad and from international partners, not just European, but other partners as well. But then domestically about capacity. Right, and I know that's something EBRD is involved in. So can you make a few words on, some comments on that, on building that domestic capacity across the board?
Yes, it's very important. We're working together with the World Bank and the European Investment Bank on public capacity, in the public sector to implement the large infrastructure that is going to be required, or the infrastructure investments. But also, we have, for years, our flagship project program with the government has been the reform support architecture. And this is a group of experts dispersed around 8 different ministries and agencies, and it's a growing universe, to help with reforms. And this will be so important for Ukraine's EU accession agenda. So I think that having those people in place, working with the ministers to deliver on the reforms, is going to set Ukraine in a good position for all the investment that will be required.
Right. And the pressure, of course, with the massive investment coming in, it's very positive, but that's enormous pressure on the existing institutions and the labor force, public and private labor force. So let's move to labor force. I want to mention this because I know in daily interactions with our business, with our clients, that's the number one topic for the last about year and a half. Labor, 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 right? There's not enough human capital. So many guys, of course, taken abroad. So many people have left the country. Some words on labor force, looking ahead. Currently, it's an issue, but if we're trying to drive the economy and have not just 3% growth, but 6-7% growth for the future with Reconstruction, how do we manage the talent management issue?
It's also a very nice question because for Ukraine, when we have about 8 million people working in Europe, living and in some countries working in the European Union, some people are still on the occupied territories. And for us, it's one of primary tasks for the government to set the rules and regulations which will draw people back to Ukraine, because we can get more and more territory, but territory without people is nothing. So the most valuable issue for our country is people, and we will make the special programs by our government to create conditions to empower people to return to Ukraine. But still we understand that some share of our citizens will still live in European Union, especially in Poland, because languages are very similar, and the longer the war continues, the more people are getting used to local languages. People go to schools, to institutes, and it will be harder and harder for us to get people back. But from our side, we design special programs in order to support our citizens who are willing to return to Ukraine. But anyway, it will be the decision of our people, and we are not able to force them. We are working to stimulate, to create conditions in order them to return after the war ends, and to support reconstruction and building of new Ukraine, of new European Ukraine.
And if it's not a secret, what are some examples of these types of programs, some of these incentive programs, or the outreach to try to reach Ukrainian labor in European countries and bring them back? Or
it's the programs to support small business of Ukraine. For example, we have program 579, which established the conditions for entrepreneurs to take loans with lower rate than the market rate. The difference is compensated by the government in order to create them conditions to establish new businesses. And actually, we have many examples with people who return from Czech Republic, from Poland, and they having experience from this Eastern and Western European countries. They try to implement their new skills inside Ukraine. And this program helps much to such issues. Also, we have a program which allows Ukrainians from other countries to enter, for children to enter the universities in Ukraine without any additional problems. So they can return and study not in European countries, but in Ukraine.
Okay, interesting, great. Good. Tomáš, let's turn it back to you. You had mentioned some of the work on the front line in defense sector that you had mentioned earlier, but can you give us some more examples, I suppose, of Czechia, the government's involvement with the front lines? Because so much of the reconstruction is actually already going on there, right? But they're also the most vulnerable, of course.
You know, we're coming from an experience that we've had in this country, and it's still a sensitive, if not painful one. After the Second World War, we basically made 3 million of German people move from our borderlands to Germany. And those regions still remain the least economically viable ones. Now, what we are seeing in Ukraine economically is precisely this happening with the regions close to the front lines. Because there is zero appetite for investment. There is very limited appetite for guaranteeing any sort of involvement on a commercial basis from international partners, from Ukrainian banks, from commercial banks, from state banks. And it's understandable from the financial logic. That's why we were trying very hard, and in some respect successfully, also to include this element in the Ukraine facility program of the European Commission. So this is the roughly 8 billion euro that are going to be spent in the programs for recovery. Also, 2 of those programs will be done by the Czech National Development Bank after some successful bid for it. And the conditions that we were discussing with other partners in the European Union were so that they would incentivize projects that will be done in the frontline regions. by 10-20%. If it's critical infrastructure and frontal region, you get 20% more financing from the grant schemes. So that's already an incentivization. And then there is plenty, and I'm getting to the defense side, there is plenty of financial instruments, of commercial banks, but also IFIs, international financial institutions, that were wary of anything related to military material. And they have been so for decades. It's slowly, but still changing. But there is an area which is quintessential for the increase of production, not only in Ukraine, but frankly also in Europe. That's dual-use material. If we look at the production of large caliber ammunition, for instance, the CNC machine that are cutting the plates, this is a dual-use technology. The nitrocelluloses, that's a dual-use technology par excellence. The nitroglycerin, everything. You can basically finance this from financial instruments, from financial tools that are available on the market, but yet unused to the full potential. And this is also crucial for the, say, bigger picture of incentivization and using the labor force there, but also the capacity. Because the capacity building is also, in our experience, and that's shared across the board of our European partners, the absorption capacity is the single most pertinent issue these days, because you have the needs for the reconstruction numbered in the hundreds of billions. Yet you have programs in single-digit billions of euro, and out of those programs, how big a percentage is actually spent? I mean, we don't even have to look only at EBRD, EIB, or World Bank, but also at Japan or South Korea, and their programs are not spent in majority. Why? The answer is absorption capacity, and that's where we're getting to this chicken and egg problem. Like, of course, the bank will not increase the budget if it's not spent fully, and it will not be moving in such numbers. But this is the third structural thing we're looking at. So yes, it's frontline regions, it's dual-use material, but it's also it's the absorption capacity to work with those who will be writing the projects with the application. Be it a commercial bank in Ukraine, be it a municipal company that will be asking for guarantees for a loan for whatever, water treatment plants or combined heat and power tools. So,
and I mean, just quickly, Charlotte, this might be for you, or Tomáš, a follow-up. How do you see that developing? I mean, this will be absolutely vital to see some of the things you just mentioned developing further, or openness, for example, EBRD into investing in defense.
Well, rather than talk about defense, I would come back to the human capital and some of the other elements, because one of the other things that will be a big area of civilian investment is housing. Mm-hmm. Because the housing stock was old in many cities in any case, not energy efficient, et cetera. But now people will be coming back. You will want to have quality housing stock. And in the places, of course, that have suffered a lot of war damage, you'll have to build entirely new. And so for EBRD, we're making this a real priority, and our real estate team and our infrastructure team will prioritize that investment. And then the other thing I thought worth mentioning on the topic of human capital is reintegration of veterans into the workforce. So EBRD is working with government, with civil society, and with many of the local banks in Ukraine to put in place programs to help enterprises that are going to employ the veterans, as well as some of the big companies that have a large share of veterans in their workforce who are coming back into employment in the factories to facilitate that. I mean, these people have given so much, so we need to make sure that they're looked after well.
Yeah, and that is such an important issue. I want to stress that, getting the veterans reintegrated. There's such a massive labor problem in the country, yet you have so many companies hesitant to hire veterans and bring them back. Sorry, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, well, I can't agree more. We're working on this with several governmental institutions in Ukraine already for some time now, with the Ministry of Veteran Affairs, with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Interior. The common topic the underlying topic, and yet the least financed, the most underfinanced and the least understood, is mental health. I mean, yes, we're talking about 8 million people that are gone in Europe mostly, that out of which at least 4 million need to come back for the economy to function properly, according to the data I got. Now, even if all these people come back, the calculation is taking them as people who could be immediately employed in the labor market. And that's not the case. That's not the case because there is 1.5 million of war veterans as we speak, and the war is not over. And all those people need to get some programs, and hundreds of thousands of people actually do have severe PTSD. I mean, that's a treatment for months, if not years. And then you have millions who need other treatment. And yet you don't have an infrastructure of such a scale, I mean, anywhere in the world, and you don't have it in Ukraine. So focusing on that, doing small projects, and for me, the key word is low threshold accessibility to mental health. It could be also done through CSR activities. You have an investor, so for instance, you can say that programs within EBRD, EIB could also include a clause that whatever investment will be supported by the programs, it should also include some care for the mental health of, say, the relevant partners in the area. Instead of a gym card, you would get a coupon for a therapist, for instance. But it can be really on a rather decentralized level with some coordination at the top, but it needs to be everywhere. Every community, every small town needs to have somebody who knows how to talk to these people.
Absolutely. No, it's a good point. And I can say the Western companies, one of their incentives in order to retain staff and attract staff are these benefits that address mental health issues, and not just for them, but for their extended families, right, for children and things like this. Oleksandr, let me turn to you. Let's just stay, last question on labor market, if we haven't driven the point home enough. But to your point, to have a reconstruction, we need far more labor than, frankly, is likely to come back from Europe. But as this panel's even titled, A New Marshall Plan, the Marshall Plan itself, though, Germany, when I think about Germany's reconstruction, they relied on a lot of imported labor, right? Spanish, Italian, especially Turks coming in, and for decades. How do you see this developing when you think about how do we replace all this talent? Yes, you get some Ukrainian refugees coming back. Yes, you get some veterans from the war coming back, retraining of people within the economy. But realistically, it seems pretty clear that we're going to have to import some labor, right?
Yeah, you are fully right about this problem because we will need more people, and we see much interest from the foreign companies which want to participate in the process of reconstruction of Ukraine. They are not able to invest their funds, but they want to get contracts for reconstruction, and they will draw their labor force as well as a part of this process of rebuilding Ukraine. Of course, as of now, we do not have precise volume of funds which will be spent on reconstruction because we have estimations, and now it's more than $700 billion which should be spent on reconstruction. But which amount we will have, we don't know. The position of Ukrainian government and the president is that all Russian assets, frozen assets, should be returned to Ukraine, but unfortunately the decision is not achieved, and we are still in the process of negotiations. And some European countries, unfortunately, they are not ready to go on such step. Now we use the funds which are generated from interests from Russian frozen assets, but not of Russian frozen assets at all.
Not the assets themselves.
Yes.
Okay, and that's where I wanted to go, so I'm glad you opened up that topic. Happy to hear from anybody on the panel on Russia's FX reserves, right? I guess firstly, what do you anticipate in the future? Do you believe that Europe and, the Western world will seize Russia's frozen assets and then hand them to Ukraine at some point? And secondly, can we have a reconstruction without it? Tomáš, please.
I think it will not happen. And basically, the discussion in Europe is about what kind of a place it should be. And the one discussion is about attractiveness for investment, for getting the money here in the banks. So, and this is the winning side of the argument. So this side is saying, if we seize this money because of this agenda, because of the Russian aggression, nobody else will want from some troubled regions to get their money into European banks. And that's the discussion as it is. On the other side is, yes, our understanding of the injustice, that it's needed as an incentivization, if not, say, covering a major part of the reconstruction. But despite this, I believe it is possible to do it without it. I think that the public financing, be it Ukraine facility, different programs from different countries, it will and should serve as seed money, as something that will be stimulating the private attractiveness, the private investments. And that's my hope, of course. But that's also what I believe is the takeaway lesson from the Marshall Plan. That, even now you have the German Marshall Fund operating money that was sent to it in the late 40s from the United States. Yeah. Because it keeps coming back. Because, it's the principle of the loan. So I don't believe that there will be a change in the attitude of European leadership, of European banks and of European governments in this regard. But still, regardless, I believe that it will happen. And by the way, just to say something controversial, I think that this will not even change after an EU member is attacked by Russia, which is a question of when, not if.
Interesting. Okay. Oleksandr, can I get your view on that? Do you agree with Tomáš that we will not take the reserves? And secondly, can we do a reconstruction without?
We, as a member of government and president and parliament, we insist that Russian assets frozen should be given for Ukraine for reconstruction, because we need to reconstruct much public assets which will not generate short-term profit. Because when we talk about private capital, we should be confident that private capital comes there where they see the profit. Private capital will not invest in the projects which will not generate profit in 10 years, like highways, for example, or railroads, which are essential for private capital to come. So we need to create this public infrastructure using the funds from Russian frozen assets, as well as paid for our citizens who suffered from the Russian aggression.
Great, thank you. And just a reminder, happy to take questions from the audience, or you can go on Slido and type your questions in, so happy to ask questions you have. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, Mr. Jock Wilson. And please introduce yourself, Jock, if you don't mind.
Hello, Jock Mendoza Wilson. I work with System Capital Management Group, which is Ukraine's largest private sector business. We invested $2 billion last year in Ukraine. I'm based in Kiev. My question is based on Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan is talked about it's given here as a template for success. It took 2 years after the Second World War for the first dollar to be disbursed from the Marshall Plan for the reconstruction of Europe. It proved to be a success. But my point is, what happens in the first 2 years after the war? And it's to the panel, how can we encourage that fast economic bounce back that's going to be necessary to both encourage Ukrainian citizens to return, to private sector to come in, for international capital to deploy? How can we reach those first responders of the economy who are likely to be large Ukrainian businesses like ours, or international investors who are already in Ukraine? What are the facilities and mechanisms in place that will make sure that happens, so we can create that positive early economic dynamic that will encourage private sector investors to come back into Ukraine?
So speed matters. I think I agree.
Exactly. You're fully right that speed matters, and Ukraine welcomes both domestic investors to invest in development of their businesses, as well as international players to come to Ukrainian market, because we expect that our domestic market will be growing. Ukraine has significant competitive advantages in the sector of agriculture, in iron and ore, in IT sector, and we hope that these benefits will be used also by foreign private investors, which will come and spend their money inside Ukraine to create the new strong Ukrainian economy.
Great. Yes.
I think we should use the instruments that we currently have, but just upload them to a systemic level first, and then just spend so much more on the incentivization within. To give an example, the Ukraine facility. So yeah, it's about guarantees mostly. It's about guarantees for investments. I mentioned the Czech example, the 60 million euro investment into the wind power plant. I mean, it was done completely without any such program. It was done purely on a commercial basis with the Ukrainian banks, and still paying off. So just imagine should we multiply the 8 billion by 5, 4, and then just add more of those billions into Ukraine facility, and therefore just the short answer is making the money cheaper. I mean, you have an interest rate, 18%, if you go to the market in Ukraine these days. That's quite hard, and still you have projects running. I mean, lowering this either after the ceasefire or even during, lowering this to some 8-10% could be a game changer, in my opinion. At least that's what I hear from some of the investors from Czechia and other European countries. So just use the instruments, maximize the volume of finances in it, and multiply this public money with the commercial banks.
Would you add anything?
Well, yes, of course, I already mentioned about the single project pipeline, which is really important for the public sector. But for the private sector, I agree that it's the domestic investors who will be on the ground. They'll already have their plans, and they will go full steam ahead, and we'll be behind them. We'll be supporting the banks who are financing in the first instance. Obviously, lower interest rates will make it easier for everybody, and I think that one could anticipate lower interest rates. And then I think the international investors will quickly be following. I mean, there's all kinds of investors sort of circling around, trying to get to know the landscape, understanding the opportunities. I do believe that Ukraine will be very well situated for that kind of big bang of investment early on in the reconstruction period.
Let's hope so. And I agree. In particularly the last 6 months, even amid the war, we've seen more people, like you said, milling around, considering some small-time investment just to get on the ground, get their foot in the door, and start moving. So it's actually encouraging. I have one particular question, then a couple final questions, and then we do have one on Slido here. But we have not talked about the United States too much, which is refreshing, actually, and the U.S.-Ukraine minerals rights deal. How, from the European perspective, from Ukrainian perspective, looking at that, what is the, I guess, Charlotte, is probably more for you or for Tomáš, whoever would like to answer it. What is the European response to that? How is this seen by European governments in terms of investing in Ukraine amid this deal?
Well, I don't see it, and I have never seen it as any competition for European programs. I mean, yeah, I keep repeating Ukraine facility, but you can definitely use these instruments that are very similar in nature, or in some respects, to also do mineral stuff. But why is it not being done by European companies? Because there are almost none European companies who are big enough to do mineral stuff, all around the world. You go to Africa, you go to Southeast Asia, Latin America, do you meet like companies from Europe bidding for these things? No. I mean, you meet guys from Canada, from South Africa, from Russia, China, and the United States, and that's it, So it's not a problem. The mineral deal is not a problem. Structurally, I don't also see it as neo-colonial stuff, No. DFC, the institution in the United States responsible for these loans and programs, so I have been meeting with them ever since the full-scale invasion, and they were always contemplating, what should we do? And we have pledged $1 billion for this and that. At the end of the day, they have barely used 1%. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they didn't have the programs through which they would be running it. Now, I'm not saying that this is a silver bullet, this deal that is being ratified now and was signed. But it's at least something. At least it gives some role to the FC to be finally useful,
Be finally useful. Well put. I'm glad you said it publicly. Okay, let's, the question here on Slido, how can we manage geopolitical dependency after the reconstruction?
Well, frankly speaking, I don't like word dependency, I would call it partnership. But Ukraine is keen to join European Union, so the quicker Ukraine becomes the member of European Union, we, from our side, we do everything possible and impossible to make it as quick as possible. It will be the best geopolitical partnership for European Union to make Ukraine member of.
Exactly. Then enjoy actual partnership. Agreed. Great. Let's finish up. Just 2 quick questions. This is for all 3 of you to sort of finalize things, summarize things here. First one's a bit negative. Second one more positive. But the first question, let's say I have a crystal ball and we're looking 10 years ahead. It's 2035. The war ended in June 2026. Reconstruction begins. We're at 2035 looking back, and Ukraine hasn't grown. Reconstruction is a failure. We didn't see infrastructure development. We didn't see private sector capital coming into the country. The country stagnated for the next decade. If that happens, holding aside black swan events, aliens invading, anything else, holding that all aside, what do we know today that would have caused that? Why would that have happened? Why would Reconstruction fail? What are the primary topics, please?
Actually, I think why could such happen if we do not have enough support from our partners to finance reconstruction in the volume which are needed? Because the volume needed is very, very big, significant, but it's the only variant how to create the strong economy of Ukraine, which will create Ukraine as a serious global player in the region and will be sufficient to make strong economy and keep the strong army and be the strong wall against Russia for European Union.
So inadequate capital. Okay, Tomáš?
I would say the never-ending imperial ambitions of Russia to undermine the stability in Ukraine through diverse means. So if you give us the comfort of putting anything within those 10 years, it could be a full range of activities, hostile activities from Russia, undermining the democratic process, increasing the feeling of corruption and corruption itself, doing sabotages, from time to time sending a couple of hundred drones somewhere, destroying some facilities. So it could be all that. I mean, that would be, so if I would just wake up in 2035 and read that the war ended officially in 26, that's what I would be thinking. Oh, just give me the summary of everything, of all the offensive activities that Russia has been doing over the 10 years. And I would then be checking the European borders, like if they have moved.
Right, okay. And half of what you said Russia was doing before 2014, by the way. So it would just be continued behavior. Okay, good point. Charlotte, I turn to you.
Well, I guess, if you had a security situation that wasn't that, then I would say what would be the problem would be lack of reform and, dealing with corruption, which has been an improving situation, but that would be my answer. If the security and sort of Russian situation was not.
So assuming Western money is there,
Yes.
assuming security is guaranteed, right? And this gets to the point of we need credible security guarantees out of Europe specifically for reconstruction, which we haven't even discussed here. Important. Great. Let's finish on a more positive note, though. So why are you, each of you, just 30 seconds each, why are you optimistic about Ukraine's reconstruction?
I'll be happy to go first.
Please.
Please.
I am so impressed. So my responsibility is Central and Southeastern Europe, but of course a close observer of Ukraine. And I am so impressed with the creativity and ingenuity and tenacity of the Ukrainian people. And I think that they are the reason that Ukraine reconstruction is going to be successful.
People. Great. Agreed. I see it every day as well.
Well, generally, I would say that it's because of the chemistry in my brain, because I'm always optimistic. But maybe to put some rationale behind it, it's definitely the inspiration from the people. I mean, I just remember when I started going to Ukraine. I mean, I was going there already before, but after the full scale, it started in July 22, and ever since I've been there like 15, 16 times in different towns and villages and and cities. So almost everywhere, it was such a genuine and energizing appetite, like thirst for doing something concrete for their country. Mm-hmm. By the way, the same applies for all the Ukrainian refugees here in Czechia that I meet with. Like this constant willingness and passion to do something and to think in a new way, just to throw the past, the Soviet past, as the Ukrainians call it, back. So this is what's making me very optimistic.
I'm also empowered by millions of Ukrainians who every day prove on front in economy as well in other sectors that they want to have strong, resilient Ukraine, which will be prospering. And I really hope that what Mr. President of Czech Republic, Petr Pavel, today said that Ukraine shall become the country of opportunities, not country of risk. And I think that together we will do Ukraine the state of opportunities.
That's great, yeah. And it's the people. I can say as well, as I was having dinner last night with a friend who said, a Ukrainian, who said, I'm so proud of my people and I love my country. And deep down, I was thinking as an American, I wish I could say that, honestly, about my own country. But to be honest, this is also why I moved to Ukraine, so I could be a part of this and the resilience and optimism of the people amid everything. So thank you very much to the panelists for your time. Very happy with that. Thank you, the audience, for the questions and your attention. Please, yes.